Hello, and welcome to week 2 of our Happy and Healthy Hormones group. So, this week we're going to be talking all about stress and the role that it plays in our hormonal health. So, I'm sure it's not news to you that stress does impact our overall health and well being, but we're going to talk about just how much of an impact that it truly has. So, before we get started, I just want to start off by saying that stress is one of the main factors in almost every single hormonal imbalance. So, just take a moment and think about that. Think about what it is that you might be going through right now and try to evaluate your stress. I know that's a little bit easier said than done, and a little bit later on in our video series, we're going to be talking about what different kinds of stress are, because oftentimes we can be stressed without even knowing it. So, just a few ways that stress can impact our hormones. It plays a huge role with hypothyroidism. Um, Stress actually can lower the production of TSH. It can decrease our T3 activation and increase reverse T3. So, these are all different types of thyroid hormones that need to be working properly in order to have a healthy and functioning thyroid. So those are just a few ways that stress can affect those thyroid hormones. It can also affect estrogen imbalances by blocking progesterone. So a lot of times when we're talking about an estrogen imbalance or estrogen dominance, we're talking about it relative to the amount of progesterone we also have. So there is something in our bodies called pregnenolone, which is a precursor hormone to progesterone. And there's actually a mechanism called pregnenolone steal, in which cortisol actually takes over, because there's so much of cortisol that it takes over and it steals the pregnenolone from creating progesterone. So that's another way that stress can really impact our balance between our estrogen and our progesterone. It can also impact menstruation. It can do this by causing a delay in ovulation. It can also impact our PMS symptoms in general. So, extreme stress can actually lead to things like cramping, painful periods, back pain, all of these different classic PMS symptoms you may have thought were normal are actually not normal. They may be common, but they're certainly not normal and certainly not how our bodies are designed to function and go through that time in our cycle. It can also have a pretty big impact on our libido as well. So when we're feeling stressed, our body is put in a fight or flight mode. So things like libido are put on the back burner because that's not needed to keep us going in that fight or flight instant. So for example, that classic example of you're running from a bear or a lion. Our body's main goal is to get out of that situation, fight or flight. It is not to, reproduce. So in that extreme example, sex drive gets put on the back burner, and that's kind of how our libido lowers during a chronically stressful time in our lives. Another thing that stress can do that really impacts our hormones and our overall well-being is it can deplete our body of its vitamins and minerals, because stress uses up those vitamins and minerals in energy stores faster. So then we burn through those vitamins and minerals faster. One example of that is magnesium. And magnesium is huge. It plays a role in over 300 different enzyme reactions in our body. So if you think about that, this one mineral that's responsible for over 300 things in our body is now becoming depleted and used up faster because of stress. Then it can't be used for all of those different tasks that it has in order to keep us healthy and our hormones healthy. And it's not just magnesium that happens to be affected by stress, it's potassium, it's sodium, it's all these different things, which again, if you do struggle with any type of thyroid issues, then you probably have heard just how crucial things like those minerals are to thyroid production. So if you can see, all of these things are intertwined. As I mentioned last week, we really do take a holistic approach to looking at the body, because it's not just your thyroid that's affected. It's not just your estrogen. It's everything working as a whole. All these different vitamins and nutrients really play a role in so many different critical parts of our health and wellness, such as our hormones. So, moving forward from that, I want to take a moment to talk about how our cortisol is supposed to work and oftentimes what actually happens. So, our cortisol is supposed to be released in the morning upon waking, and it's supposed to gradually decrease as the day goes on to prepare us for rest. So, in the morning, our cortisol rises, and then in the evenings it should lower while melatonin rises. Oftentimes during a short-term situation, again, this is what's supposed to happen because stress is supposed to be short-term. Cortisol is released in order to help the body fight off trauma, extreme temperatures, infections, emotional changes. Again, that fight or flight response. Cortisol is all supposed to help with those, again, short-term stressors. We're not meant to have this happen to our bodies long term. That's when we start to get into trouble and fatigue and so many different health concerns that come along with prolonged stress response. So, if you've ever heard of the term adrenal fatigue, it will actually be referring to it in this program as Hpa Access Dysfunction, because that's actually what's really happening. Is it's not necessarily fatigue, but it's because of this chronic long-term stressor. Our body is actually dysfunctioning due to the stress response. So with HPA access dysfunction, our cortisol is remaining high and keeps getting released over and over again. And what that does is it then causes our body functions to shut down, and it can leave us feeling depressed. It can lead to us having blood pressure issues, things like brain fog, immune system problems, cravings, sleep issues, all of that. And again, as I mentioned earlier, our sex hormones then get put on the back burner, and this can again lead to things like low libido, infertility, missed periods, lower production of those different thyroid hormones. So that is why it's so important to have a good handle on our stress and be able to recognize the different stressors and calm ourselves down. And I know that's easier said than done. So in the next video, we're actually going to be talking about some methods for that. So stay tuned and we'll chat soon.